Hello, my name is Bob Drury. This is my co-author, Tom Clavin. We've written a book called The Heart of Everything That Is, The Untold Story of Red Cloud, an American Legend.
And this is History in 5. We're going to tell you 5 things you never knew about Red Cloud, about the 1800s, the American West, and about the Sioux Indians.
One of the myths that we found really interesting was that of the peaceful, noble savage before the white man came along. Nothing could be further from the truth. These Indians were killing each other in Stone Age battles in the most gruesome, gory, horrific way long before white settlers went west. But when the white settlers did go west, they were aghast. These people, these were Civil War veterans. They had seen war, they had seen carnage, but they had seen nothing like what the Indians had been doing to each other and were now doing to tradesmen, to settlers, to the cavalrymen. They would come across families with severed limbs, with severed private parts, scalped of course, their eyeballs out. To the Americans coming west, this was just horrific. To the Indians, it was natural.
Red Cloud is the first, last, and only American war chief to win a war against the U.S. government. Red Cloud was also kind of obscured by history. He was born in Nebraska in 1821. Much of his life was unknown. Nobody was reporting about what the tribes out west were doing in the 1820s, 30s, and 40s. So in a lot of ways, Red Cloud snuck up on the American government. When they went to war against him, when he was defending the Black Hills, he surprised them. And by the end of the Red Cloud War, he could claim victory. He could actually say in triumph that I defeated the U.S. government.
The cavalry, unbelievably, these were veterans of the Civil War, and they underestimated both Red Cloud as a strategist and Red Cloud as a tactician. For the first time ever, Indians were attacking cavalry posts, outposts, at the same time, hundreds of miles apart. Indians never followed up on a victory. He would ambush and then he'd follow up on the ambush. The whites were chasing their tails. These were ghosts. They'd disappear into the prairie. They'd hit, they'd run. They were really the first guerrillas. And Red Cloud, he planned all this. He was strategically minded enough to know that this is the only way we are going to beat the stronger, more well-armed U.S. Army. Later in life, when Red Cloud was living on the Pine Ridge Reservation, he would walk to the post office every morning and he'd meet his own friend, the French-Canadian trader, Sam Dion. And they'd sit down and they'd talk about the old times. There was no recorded history of how the Indians interacted with other Indians before the white men came along. But Red Cloud would tell Sam Dion these stories. Dion would go in, sit down with the postmaster, repeat the stories, and the postmaster would write it all down. Now this autobiography, this was gold, but it was lost to history. It got buried in an archive, and then in the late 90s it was dusted off, and Tom and I dug it up, and it just gave such a rich background to the era we were writing about that we couldn't have written this book without it.
The standard history books will tell you that Red Cloud's war ended in 1868, when Red Cloud signed a treaty with the U.S. Army, with the U.S. government. The fact is that's not true. Red Cloud's war never ended. It's still going on today. Red Cloud himself retired to the reservation system in the 1870s, and he lived out the rest of his life on the reservation. He didn't die until he was 89 years old and had a very peaceful last years. But the war continued, and the reason for that is that the U.S. government always coveted the Black Hills, and they eventually got it, and they took it away from the Lakota Sioux. And even today, the Lakota Sioux are looking to get that Black Hills territory back. And they're still fighting. They're not fighting with guns and with knives and with cannons as they did in the Red Cloud War of the 1860s. They're fighting through the courts. They're fighting through the court of public opinion. They're appealing to the morality of the American people, that this was land stolen from the Lakota Sioux, and they still want it back.